In this episode of the podcast, we are talking about how easily life slips. In this episode of the podcast, we are going to be talking about how easy it is to slip into survival mode instead of truly living. Too often, we get stuck on autopilot, chasing obligations, numbing out with distractions, and waiting for someday to create a life that we actually love. But God isn't calling us to perfection or busyness. He's inviting us into daily faithfulness and alignment with what matters most. In this episode, I'm going to unpack why so many of us feel stuck in this life, and then I'm going to give you a simple 3-step framework to start building rhythms around your core values, naming what matters, creating habits that make space for those things, and saying no to what doesn't fit. You'll also get the next steps to shift from surviving to creating a life you love today. All of these things are going to help you to cultivate peace, purpose, and lasting change. Welcome to A More Beautiful Life Collective, the podcast where I help Christian women bridge the gap between the woman that they want to be and the life that they're currently living, with grace, simple rhythms, and a heart rooted in God. I'm your host, Casey Fletcher. Let's take the next step together. Hey everyone, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 2 of A More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fletcher, and today I wanted to tell you about one of my highlights from this past week. All right, so imagine this with me. It was nighttime. I was sitting in my rocking chair trying to nurse my fussy baby. It was almost time for bed. My husband, who is busy building a business, he was busy. He was working late, so he was out in his shop. And so I needed to put the kids to bed while also nursing the baby so that we could make it to school the next morning. All right, so every night we have the same routine. We do pajamas, then we brush teeth, go potty, and it's time for bed. So I was thinking, well, my kids have done this every day for the past since they were born. And so while I was nursing my baby, I sent the kids into the bathroom to say, okay, go brush teeth, sit on the potty, then come back in here, we'll read a book, and we'll go to bed. All right, so they went off. They went to go brush teeth, and then I started hearing these noises. And I was like, okay, well, my son ran in here. He said, Mary, she dumped toothpaste all over the sink. And I was like, okay, I'll clean it up later. Then my daughter came in, and it looked like she had toothpaste in her hair. I was like, Mary, what is in your hair? And so we started reading a book, and I looked a little bit closer, and then I saw this big glob of toothpaste. I said, okay, come here. Let me try to get this out of your hair. Again, while trying to finagle the baby. And she came over, and I looked, and all of a sudden I saw, it's like, that's not just toothpaste. That's a huge glob of hair that's not attached to her head. And I said, what happened? And she said, well, Jonah, he put toothpaste in my hair, so I had to get it out. And then she acted like she was cutting out the hair. She said she tried to wash it. It didn't come out. I found that my son had put the toothpaste in her hair, and she chopped it off. My little girl's hair, who had never been cut before, a huge chunk of it was gone. And of course, I was upset, and I felt like, it's like where you feel that moment of being so frustrated that you're about to cry because you're like, I'm trying to do one thing, to have a calm moment where we could just read a book and put the kids to bed, sing Kumbaya and have a nice night. And instead, what is happening? I'm trying to keep my baby from crying while also trying to reprimand my son, while also trying to wash out the toothpaste from my daughter's hair and try to figure out, okay, am I going to have to chop all of her hair off to make it look normal? We just roll with it. She just looks like she has a mullet now. But this is the thing. It's like maybe you felt this way too, where you want to live this beautiful life, but we get caught up surviving. Our husbands work late. Our kids drive us up the wall. Our job makes too many demands. Our budget is just not enough. And we have these dreams, but instead of living them, we're just stuck treading water. When was the last time that you actually felt that you were living the life that you wanted and not just surviving? In this last episode of the podcast, we were talking about the woman that we wanted to be. And we talked about how a lot of us, we feel like we're stuck. We're on one side of this huge canyon, and on the other side is the woman that we want to be. And we want to get there, but we're stuck. And so today we're going to focus why we're stuck and how to try to make the small, faithful steps to get to that woman, what we want to be. And so to do that, the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, okay, why are we stuck? why can't we get there? Why can't we become her, this woman that we want to be? And I think part of it is that we are just creatures of habit. We've talked about this before on the blog, that at least 43% of our day is determined by habits. When we get busy and life starts getting more and more full, we start relying more and more on the habits and routines that we've created. We take the path of least resistance, and we start to run on autopilot. We have work, chores, kids, bedtime, then repeat. And on autopilot, life becomes a blur of obligations. It becomes a list of to-dos. In these moments, we think we'll get around to building the life that we dream of, but truly that someday never comes. And every day, we are just treading these paths of least resistance more and more. The deeper the trench is worn, the harder it is to get out of it. In these moments, it's easy to fill up our lives with clutter. It can be physical clutter in the space of our homes as we start to add more and more things to our days, but it also can be mental in the form of vegging out, whether that's with Netflix or social media. This cultural noise and the constant on-the-go nature of life can drown out God's voice. And all of a sudden we wake up and we have gray hairs and an aching back and a bewilderment saying, where's the time gone? Are you a Christmas kind of girl? I think you either are or you're not, but I definitely am. And I love the decorations and the music and the food and the lights. There's just a joy that fills the air. When we were first married, we were living through, our house being renovated. Everything was under construction. We didn't have a kitchen. We were never really settled. I had even stored our wedding gifts in a closet. And I was like, okay, whenever the house is finished, we'll open these up. And the house was never finished while we lived in it. And so all of those gifts, we finally opened them whenever we moved. I was just waiting, for better days to come around the corner. But a month passed, and then another month, and another month, and Christmas rolled around. And I asked, I was like, are we going to get out the tree this year? And it just seemed like, how could we celebrate with our life looking like this? Like, what's even the point of trying to make things special if everything's not finished, if everything's not fixed? I wanted to change. I wanted to make the house feel like a home, but it felt like it was insurmountable, and it felt like it really didn't matter. So I just put it off, and we ran on autopilot, and the tree stayed in the box for another year. In the moment, I should have told myself not to buy in to the lie that life has to be completely picture perfect right away to start making steps towards building something better. My kids, they're dumpers. So basically, they take out a box of toys, and instead of finding the 2 or 3 little toys that they want to play with, they take the box and dump it out. And then they're like, the toy's not in this one. So they take another box and they dump it out. And of course, if you've ever seen that, it's like, the room can go from, perfectly clean to a disaster zone in about 10 minutes if you have that. And it's hard to feel the motivation for me. If I'm going in, they're not really good at picking up yet. They'll kind of help, but it's very much helping in quotation marks. But it can be hard to get the motivation to clean up consistently after them whenever I know that the next day, if they just do whatever they want, the room will be a mess again, as bad a mess in about 10 minutes. And so it's hard to feel like, okay, I'm going to do this again and again and again. But the longer that I put off the little actions that would help kind of tide the chaos of the room, putting back those 1 or 2 boxes, the more and more that the room becomes a mess, that it's harder and harder to clean up after. The floor doesn't get vacuumed then, and the trash starts getting on the floor, and it just gets worse and worse. So how would I solve this issue? Well, it's not with a major overhaul. There's nothing that I can do that's going to solve the problem forever. I could throw out all of their toys, but I also don't want to cause that kind of childhood trauma. And so it's not going to be with some new course or book or organization item. Truly, the only thing that's going to solve the chaos there is just through faithful rhythms. Because here's the truth. God isn't asking you to overhaul your entire life to obey him. He's just inviting you into daily faithfulness. We have to change our mindset. We don't necessarily need the balance of, I need to spend 1 hour cleaning up every day and 1 hour with my family and 1 hour working out and 1 hour reading my Bible. We don't need balance. We need alignment in our life. So what does this actually mean? Well, we need a life that matches our values and our calling. I don't need to perfectly portion out my day in a pie chart, dividing up the time I spend with my picking up toys with my Bible time and the time with my husband. What I do need is to figure out what I truly want my life to be. And then I daily have to step forward in faith, making that dream a reality. So here's how we pursue this daily faithfulness. First, we need to name what matters most. We need to clarify our values to determine what should fill our days. Then we need to look at all of the things that fill our life, and we have to prioritize those things based on what truly matters. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, what do we value? Your values could be related to faith and spiritual life. And like I talked about on the last podcast, really that should be the foundation of what you do. Your values could also be your family and relationships, so your marriage, your friendships, your community, your church family. It could be related to personal growth and learning. It could be about your health and well-being, your work and calling. All of these things can be what you value, what drives your days. What I would do is I would pick 5 to 10 values that resonate the most with you. And you need to ask yourself, okay, if I could only focus my time and energy on these, what would they be? What would be the things in your life that you would focus on? Now, I think it's helpful whenever we do this. There's some things like your marriage, you're only married to one person. So if you said your marriage, that's going to definitely clarify what you value. But if you say that your health is something that you want to value, you can clarify. You can say, I want to look a certain way, or I want to be healthy so that I can live longer, or I want to be healthy so that I can play with my kids. Knowing that will help give you the filter that you want. So make sure that you kind of pinpoint what you want about your values. If you're wanting to build a life that feels aligned with your values, I have a 5-day devotional in the shop that will help you to do this. This devotional is called Build a More Beautiful Life, 5 Days to Align Your Work, Family, and Calling. What you'll do in this devotional is clarify your values and determine how to help your values match the work that you are doing. The next step is to create rhythms that make space for those things. When we want to put our values into action, we have to ask, okay, how does this practically look? It's not enough to state our values. If we do that, we can talk until we're blue in the face about the things that we care about. But unless we put our values to practice, unless we put our money where our mouth is, ultimately it doesn't matter. We have to make our actions reflect the things that we value. This means we have to look at what we're doing throughout our day, and we have to put into practice actions that will ultimately show what we value. So for instance, in the example of faith and family, if I said, okay, my faith is important to me and my family is important to me, what could be some actions that would help to put your money where your mouth is, put that value in action? Well, one could be family dinner and devotions. If you sat every night and had family dinner together, and then you also did a devotion in that time, you are showing with your time what you value. And it's something that over the long haul, if you did that every day, even for a month, you're going to be closer with your family, and your family is going to be closer to God because you are investing time in the thing that you care about. So what I would do is I would brainstorm a list of actions for the values that you identified. What are some habits that show that you value that thing? Some examples could be if you value faith and spiritual life, would be daily scripture reading, making sure that you have time in the morning to read your Bible or whenever. It could be if you value personal growth and learning, listening to podcasts on your way to work is a great way to grow. Or setting some time to read a book every day is a great way to grow in that. Again, if you value health and wellness, you got to make sure that if you say, I want to be healthy, that at some point in the day, you are investing time in that, whether that's with home cooked meals or with exercising. We know that our habits ultimately show what we value, but a lot of times we need that reminder to make sure that our habits, that we're putting into practice the habits that we should have. Lastly, we need to say no to what doesn't fit. If we say that our faith and our family matters most, our days should be aligned with this. And so that means that we have to choose to say no to the things that are getting in the way of living out these values. When we establish values, we are ultimately saying, this other thing does not matter. If faith and family matters most, it also means that we have to eliminate the things that don't matter. And so that could be a fitness goal. If faith and family matters most, and so every night you want to have a family dinner, you're probably not going to go and spend an hour at the gym because you're just not going to have time. You have to eliminate the things that matter the least. So you might have to remove the fitness goals, the sports schedules, or even an immaculate home because you have things that you value and you have to deprioritize the things that don't. So, we want our lives to be lives that intentionally reflect our values. Even more than this, we want our lives to be a testimony to who and whose we are. Let's start creating that life we love today. And here's 3 simple ways that you can do that. First, you need to name your non-negotiables just for this week. What are the things that you want to accomplish with your time this week? Then add 1 micro habit, a tiny habit, something that doesn't take a lot of willpower to do, but will show that you are doing what you value. These things could include 5 minutes of prayer, a walk outside, 10 minutes creating or reading a book. Lastly, you need to identify 1 distraction to drain or remove from your life. With my 3 kids, there's an ever-present fight against the chaos. Sometimes it feels like I have things more under control. Sometimes it does not, but I'm always working against the tide of laundry, of dishes and toys strewn across the floor. I want my home to create peace and calm for myself and for my family, and that is one of my values. But to cultivate this value, I have to create systems that support that. And so there's some days where, I feel like there's so much chaos, but, I've skipped some routines that I know that I should do. And so one of the small, tiny micro habits that I've been doing is just a 5-minute tidy right after breakfast before we start school that helps reset their rooms and helps me clear the counter and get all the breakfast dishes in the dishwasher. It's not that much. It's just a few minutes, but it does set the day in the right direction. What am I not doing while I'm tidying? Well, I'm not checking my phone. I'm not, checking on Facebook. I'm not doing something else that otherwise kills time. Instead, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to do this now. It's a non-negotiable. And ultimately, that habit helps me to live out my values. If you're ready to stop waiting for someday and start building the life that God is calling you to have, join the 30 Days to a Life You Love challenge. This challenge I'm hosting in my Facebook group, A More Beautiful Life Collective, is not about perfection. It's about progress and peace. Each day you'll get 1 small, tiny habit that will help you build a life you love. It will help you to become the woman that you want to be. All of these things that we're doing are about small steps towards a life lived with intentionality. If you want to go deeper, you can also grab a Life You Love toolkit, which goes into 7 pillars of a lovely life and tells you how to incorporate those things in the life that you have today. And it will help you to make sure that what you start actually lasts. Remember, you don't have to overhaul your life. Just start today with 1 faithful step. We've been promised an abundant life in John 10:10, but we have to walk forward, rightly ordering our days so that we can receive that abundance. Let's do this together. Again, you can start by signing up for the 30 Days to a Life You Love challenge. You can also share this episode with a friend so that you can have that accountability to walk forward together. And you can subscribe to the blog, podcast, and our social media for daily encouragement. Thanks for joining us this week. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram at amorebeautiful.collective.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the blog and join us next week, where we talk about what it means to create our dreams and live abundantly in our calling. Until then, keep creating a life you love and cultivating your heart for God. Thanks so much for joining me this week on A More Beautiful Life Collective podcast. If you love what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. You can also visit my blog at amorebeautiful.collective.com for more resources, printables, and guides to help you cultivate faith, purpose, and joy every day. Until next time, keep creating a life you love and cultivate your heart for God.